All right. Peace and greetings, YouTubers. Pharrell Williams. Once again, you have tried it. And this is one of the biggest issues I have when they constantly try to have these celebrities lead intellectual conversations in which they don't have the range for. One of the critiques I've always had of somebody like a Pharrell Williams, especially after the whole New Blacks ordeal from 2014, is that Pharrell Williams is somebody who does not have an understanding of cause and effect when it comes to history in the United States, let alone race. And so when somebody doesn't have that understanding, they often feel that they can fix systemic issues and tangible things that affect people each and every day through symbolism and symbolism nuggets. And that's the way that he moves. And I think the bigger issue that I have is not only does he believe this, but he wants to pull everybody else into that delusional state of being. He's somebody that can do that because he's wealthy and he can fund a lifestyle that allows him to turn a blind eye to the reality of what's happening in the world right now. But for the average everyday person, that's not our reality. And for me, that is a very dangerous slope to be on. So I want to watch and show this clip really quick, and then I want to have a conversation.
As we look at what's going on in the current political climate, I'm just saying to, I want to turn everybody off. I hate politics. Like, despise them. It's a magic trick that it's not real. I don't believe in either side. So I think when you pick a side, you are only, you are inadvertently supporting division. Yeah, it's not a popular point of view, but I just got to say, like, think about it. The wells are drying up, and then, okay, now the diversity's off the table, now equity's off the table, now inclusion's off the table. So that makes me ask myself, okay, so how do we survive? Well, are there Black people here for that tonight? Yeah. And in your heart, do you think for what it is that you do and who you are, do you think you're the best? Okay, so do you want the job because you're Black or because you're the best? Do you want someone to support your startup because you're Black or because you're the best? Right, so I think now for me it's about us having the best ambition. That's the reason why you should support these businesses. Yes, they happen to be Black and brown, but it should be based on the thesis that we're the best, not because we are a total shade of a skin color. That's a point of view that I have now that I'm resting on. And if diversity, equity, and inclusion ever comes back in style, cool. But in the meantime, I want to focus on being the best because I can bank on it. Because that's what's going to get you the position. Where, I don't want you to give me anything. I want you to panic and not let me out the room because I'm the best.
I really want these celebrities to stop being spineless and passing it off as being revolutionary. Because the question really becomes, Pharrell, is this really the conversation you want to have right now? With everything happening in the world, with every headline we've seen over the last 10 or 11 months, you still want to land on this hill, and this is the hill that you want to die on. Right now. With everything. You know what? Okay, let's go ahead and dig the grave in. And so, really, the question becomes, because there's so much to be said here. Like, one, I'm going to try to break this down into a few talking points. So first, let's just start with politics, because that's what he led with, right? He hates politics. He thinks it's divisive. Let's start there. The reality is nobody likes politics. Politics is not enjoyable. It is stressful to follow. But the reality is when you don't do politics, politics will do you. Even as somebody who has a channel that tends to spend a lot of time on subjects surrounding the Black community and on politics, I don't like politics. I don't want to follow that crap every day because it's draining, it's stressful, it's exhausting. But I'm not going to turn a blind eye to what's happening around me and then tell everybody else to stay in delusion land too. Because again, now we're leading everybody into a burning house. And somebody like a Pharrell Williams continues to do that over and over again. And mainly it's because he's what I call one of these digestible Black celebrities. Somebody who's going to remain neutral in everything because it keeps his pockets lined up. As long as he keeps the people who are paying him happy by not shaking the table, by not challenging the status quo, by not really addressing the flaws that exist with anti-Blackness, he will always be paid, and he understands that. So he's always going to just, give us what you call symbolism nuggets and tell us we're all crazy, and if we just move the same way he does, we'll all be all right. That is dangerous, and I have an issue with that. And so the idea of saying that politics is fake or it's not real or it's magic tricks, that's what you call symbolism talk. But can we talk about the reality of what is? We just watched 42 million Americans not have equitable access to food options because SNAP was cut. That is a result of politics. We just watched 730,000 federal employees not receive a paycheck as a result of politics, the very politics that you claim is not real. And an additional 670,000 federal employees get furloughed as a result of the politics that you claim are not real. We watched TSA workers not get paid but still have to come to work as a result of politics not being real. Had that same shutdown continued past November 14th, we would have watched 1.3 million military personnel not receive a paycheck as a result of the politics that you don't think are real. And when it comes to Black folks in politics in the United States, one of the things that I've always said on this channel is that when it comes to the United States and race, nothing is ever precedent. Nothing is ever protected and nothing is ever guaranteed. Let's just flash back 20 years ago. 20 years ago, collectively, people couldn't even fathom the idea of the Voting Rights Act being stripped away. And now here we are in 2025. Back in 2013, we watched segments of Section 4 get stripped away. And now on the chopping block is Section 2A in the Supreme Court. And I guarantee you, like I've been saying, next in line will be Section 5. And this goes to show that we can never get comfortable and we can never become complacent as a collective because somebody's always actively working against us. And so the question really becomes, Pharrell, who is this conversation you're having actually for? Because what I see somebody who doesn't want to shake the table because it will mess up their money. And so they always stay out of these conversations. And honestly, I don't need celebrities and entertainers to always have these conversations anyway, because again, a lot of times they haven't done the research. They don't have the range for the conversations. I'd rather they do their entertainment, do whatever they do. And there are some exceptions who get it, but a lot of times these people just be up here saying anything. But for somebody like a Pharrell, he's not going against that status quo because it messes up his money. And we know right now in the United States, the status quo is white first, everybody else to the back. And so when we talk about even just politics in that term of divisive, I always say when people tend to use the term divisive when they're speaking of politics, it's normally from the standpoint of people who are fine with the way that things are. It's normally from people who endorse the ideas of anti-blackness that exist and who endorse the ideas of punitive policy that works against black people collectively and other marginalized groups of people. Those are normally the people who lead the conversations of something being divisive, because it's always presented as if American politics is this realm where everybody has good intentions. And everybody means well, and everybody has integrity, and sometimes we just disagree on little things here. And when we can't come to a common medium, that's divisive. And I always say that's not how this works. We can look at Project 2025. Project 2025 aims to marginalize every group in this country except white men, specifically straight white men, right? That's Project 2025. Them to the front, everybody else to the back. And not only that, creating permanent underclasses by stripping away protections, by affecting people's commerce, by affecting livelihood, doing any and everything to get the United States to a space where everyone will have to answer to white men. That's literally Project 2025. And so when I hear people say, oh, politics is divisive, my thing is this. Look where we're at right now. Project 2025 is now a real thing that is coming into fruition. We have people in power as a result of the politics that Pharrell claims is not a real thing, who are now in positions of power to ensure that all 900 pages of Project 2025 become a reality. So when somebody says things are divisive, here's the thing. People try to equate the offensive, and when I say the offensive, those who have the punitive policy, those who create things that disenfranchise and marginalize groups of people, they paint that as being equatable to people who are on the receiving end of those atrocities, to people who are offended or displaced or become collateral to that oppressive policy. And they try to paint both of those things to be equatable and then throw out the term divisive. Oh, we need to all come together. First of all, I don't need to be in community with people that are trying to oppress me. I don't need to be connected and be in alignment and be able to touch and agree and break bread with those who are actively trying to ensure that my livelihood is in their hands and that I have to answer to them and be in a position of servitude. That is some BS. And so a lot of times when somebody like a Pharrell Williams loves to do the I don't do politics, it's divisive, that's a cop-out, right? Just say you don't have the range for the conversation. Just say you don't understand what's happening. It's okay. I don't have a problem with people who don't know what they don't know. That's perfectly fine. But when you try to lead a charge and lead everybody else into the burning house, that's when I have an issue. Even in the segment where he starts talking about DEI, which I want to break into two parts, but let me go with the first part of this. When he poses the question, do you want to be hired because you're black or because you're the best? That alone already tells me how he sees black people collectively, but it also tells me that even with the way that that question is posed, it's posed from a standpoint of assuming that every white person in America that's in the position that they're in are in it because they were the best. And in addition to that, that white Americans collectively have earned and fought for every single thing that they have because they're the best. When in reality, white Americans have been given every federal handout you could hand out, not because they were the best, but because they were white. And because of that, that is how they have been able to build so much wealth over the generations and have a monopoly on everything. Again, not because they were the best, but because they were white. And again, it was backed by the federal government. And we have example after example. Look here. Look here. Another example. Another example. Here's the fifth example. The sixth example. Another example. Handout. 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 Another handout. 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 Another handout. Another handout. Another handout. Example 19. Example 20. Example 21. I could be petty and keep going, but actually, no, I'm going to be petty because you know what? I have a channel where I've already had these conversations and I can reference old videos. We can even talk about colonial times. We can talk about life before the 20th century, and we have more examples. Let's pause and go to a different video really quick. Exhibit A. If we go back to 1675, you had the Massachusetts Bay Colony, where they pretty much gave plantation rights in 6 square mile increments to worthy individuals so that the population could grow. Now, mind you, there were black people who were enslaved. There were also black people who were free, but understand that anybody who was black was not deemed eligible or worthy for those land grants. So they were left out, and that went to white folks. Understand, this is the conversation of building generational wealth over time, because what happens? Land is valuable. Then in 1683, you have Maryland and Virginia that established these 50-acre land grants for anybody who pays their way across the Atlantic. All you gotta do is pay your way across, and you're gonna get 50 acres. However, you have to pay. So if you're one of those black folks at the bottom of the ship who got a free ride across the water involuntarily, you won't be getting anything. So you are too excluded and left out of that conversation. 1785, the Federal Ordinance of 1785 allocated plots of land, 640 acres, for just $1 per acre. And of course, black folks, again, those who were enslaved and freed, were not eligible because black people were prohibited from legally owning land. 1800, the federal government establishes liberal credit privileges in Western territories for buyers of public land at a price of $1 per acre. Again, those who are enslaved and those who are free that are black still are considered uncredit worthy. 1830, the Federal Preemption Act grants land settlers right to produce up to 160 acres each at $1.25 per acre. Please understand, $1.25 back in 1830 is the equivalent of $42.44. Again, so it's not even a whole lot of money. Just imagine if you could buy an acre of land for $44 in 2024. Imagine that. And again, the vast majority of black people at the time are still enslaved, and there is no evidence of significant participation by black Americans who were free at the time. Then we get to 1850. There were 130 million acres of land given through land grants to white business owners that worked in the railroads. Understand, black business owners were not eligible to participate or own any kind of railroad anything because, again, no, y'all just won't be a part of that. And understand that on this land, right, there would be oil found. There would be natural resources found. This would be the building blocks of our current modern day big oil companies. So when we're talking about how this wealth can travel back hundreds of years, this is what we're talking about. Then we get to 1862. You have the Homestead Act, right? This is 270 million acres that's pretty much given away for free in increments of 160. Now, I will say in this example, black people were given a portion of that. But even when we're talking percentages versus population ratio, them numbers don't add up. Clearly, some folks are still being left out in disproportionate amounts, right? But again, this conversation of how much is just being given to folks constantly. So you have the Homestead Act. We can talk about the Mineral Leasing Act of 1920, where again, U.S. federal government is like, hey, wealthy, affluent white Americans, if you guys want to go and explore the public lands in search of oil and natural resources, we're giving you permission to do so, and you can claim it as yours. You know, go for it, but this is only for y'all. Black folks that have a little bit of money, all three of y'all, don't ask, because it's not for you, right? This goes back to what I was saying in regard to those building blocks, understanding how generational wealth has worked. And even when we're talking businesses, understand that, like I said earlier, those big giant corporations, a lot of them got their start from some of these smaller programs. So recognize the access that white business owners had during the early 1900s, the 1800s, the 1700s, even the 1600s. This is what would create the space where now we have the era of mom and pop shop versus corporation and industry. A lot of the people that were able to transition into industry and corporation were able to do so because they were sitting on so much money that had been accumulated thanks to the benefits of these earlier programs from previous centuries and previous decades that they had been sitting on and that had been passed down generationally. And so again, the idea of posing the question about being the best or being hired because you're black tells me everything I need to know about how he sees us. In reality, black people collectively know that we have to be the best at everything just to get the bare minimum, right? Just to get a foot in the door. That's something that is collectively understood. That's why you hear the phrase, black folks work twice as hard for half the results. That's always been the reality for us collectively. And so this idea of assuming that we just haven't worked hard enough and there's just something intellectually missing within us collectively where we don't understand that we just got to work harder and we can get to where the rest of them are without understanding the conversation of cause and effect and understanding that the very demographic in which he worships had everything handed to them to ensure that black people were always in a subservient position to white Americans tells me everything I need to know about a Pharrell Williams. Also, when it comes to DEI, I've already made a video talking about this in depth, so I will just post a link to that video in the description on this video. But the second thing that I wanted to say about DEI on this video is that we're now in a space where the term DEI has been made interchangeable with race. And now this is giving people an opportunity to get rid of everything all in the name of DEI, when in reality, they are at this point attacking people based on their race, right? We're now watching DEI be weaponized against black people, against other groups of people, to the point where we have the White House dropping executive order after executive order. Museums are literally getting rid of exhibits because they now fall under the scope of DEI. We have scientific research when it comes to healthcare about diseases that affect different groups of people in a disproportionate amount of numbers based on their race, where now that's seen as DEI, and the funding for that research has been cut because DEI is now being weaponized in the same way terms like CRT and woke were being weaponized. And so now we're in a space where anything that's seen as black goes into the DEI bubble. The perfect example is sometimes you can literally look at any article, any video of some prevalent black person that has done something amazing and done something well. And as soon as you go to the comment section, the first thing you're going to see is DEI this, DEI that, DEI this. White America has collectively accepted the idea of DEI meaning unqualified black folks, and it must be gotten rid of. And that's the space we're in right now. So by Pharrell jumping into the conversation he thought he was leading, you are helping speed up the process of exactly what it is they're aiming to do. Black people are literally being fired for being black, but it's falling under the guise of DEI as the scapegoat. In the same way, when people want to do some really, really racist stuff, they just call it patriotism. The thing that people need to understand is, in addition to opportunities being squandered by people all of a sudden gutting all of this DEI stuff, they're also taking away things black people already had anyway that had nothing to do with a DEI. Where again, if it's black, it's gotta go. And for the folks who are gonna come on here talking about, well, black folks need to build their own and need to understand what they have in their own community, we've done that. We've minded our business. We've built our own establishments, and guess who shows up every time? 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 Look who's here. We got another visitor. Here they come. I can see them coming from the hip. Here they go. All right, they're pulling in. They're pulling in. Okay, now they're coming down. Oh, okay, here they come down on the ropes. Okay, they're sending in reinforcements, and here they go again, right? People need to understand that when we're even having this conversation of economic wealth, white Americans have been given an economic head start in this country and have always had one, to the point where we had our federal government ensuring that they would be okay while others were not. And that wealth that has been accumulated has compounded, right? Compounded, interest built tenfold, to the point where they get to just live off the residuals, okay? They got it good on that end. And so when people try to paint this idea of, oh, well, black people just didn't work hard enough, everything that we have worked hard for, they have actively worked to dismantle, and that's what they're doing right now. So that's why when somebody like a Pharrell Williams tries to lead this conversation of, oh, we're just not being the best, or we need to aim to be the best, understand that it is a very tone-deaf analysis, because again, you are trying to attack the symptom without ever paying attention to the origin or what the Kickstarter was. And that's the issue that I have. Even when we're talking businesses, right? 39% of black business loans get rejected compared to only 18% of white. And it has nothing to do with something being the best. Again, it goes back to the conversation of people receiving benefits because they are white. When a population of a country sees themselves as the standard and the default, they never have to challenge themselves to get better or work on themselves because they're so used to everything already being afforded to them. When on the flip side, those groups that have been marginalized and those groups that have had everything actively work against them, it teaches that collective how to build with nothing, how to create with nothing, how to make do with what they have, and not only do well, but excel and thrive. And so people are fearful of that because, again, in all these different spaces where all these marginalized groups continue to compete, they start to outperform everybody else. And people don't want that. So that's why we're going into what I call almost like a phase 2 of what happened when they were trying to get rid of Reconstruction, to the point where white America will actively work against their own interests to ensure that the rest of us stay beneath them. That's the reason we don't have universal health care. That's the reason state schools started charging tuition. As soon as we integrated public schooling, all of a sudden state schools got tuition and not free anymore. So that's the reality. People are afraid to compete because they recognize they can't hang in the room with everybody else because they no longer have the skill set. All they have is whiteness to keep them moving forward, and so they will use that whiteness as a weapon to ensure that everybody else stays beneath them. That's something Pharrell Williams does not understand, and which is why he is somehow still attacking the symptom and painting all of the ills of the world with people who just didn't work hard enough because they weren't the best. Pharrell, please, shut the f*** up. Anyway, I'm out. Share your 2 cents, subscribe.